All right, it is good to be here. This is not the topic I would have chosen, so just know that up front. I could pick 100 other things I'd rather talk about tonight. I'd rather talk about love, sex, and dating. I'd rather talk about, how you can be effective at getting into any college you want to get into. But we're not talking about that. Tonight we're talking about the whole topic of depression and suicide. It was September 22nd, 1985, and it was the first time I ever dealt with a high school student who took his life. Back in the day, I didn't have gray hair. I had brown hair, and I was a youth pastor. I was in my 20s. And I got a phone call from the associate pastor, said, "John, you got to get over to so-and-so's house." And so I got over to the house, and I realized quickly he had given me a briefing what had happened. And it was so surreal. It was like caution tape everywhere, right? And it was just like in the movies. They asked me who I was. They had my name on a list. They pulled the tape up. I walked in, and in the living room was a mom, a dad, and a junior high little brother in a puddle of tears on the floor. And they were moaning. They were crying. They were so distraught. Let me tell you about Daryl. He was a junior at Huntington Beach High School. He was a varsity water polo player. He had lettered. He had been selected to be on an all-star team that was going to be touring in Australia at Christmas. He had a 3.9 grade point average because that's before they really had AP classes that, gave you 5.0s. He had the girlfriend, and for others, he had a car, and the car actually ran. And it was one of those things like he had everything going. And his suicide note said, "Life is too hard. Adios." And that was my introduction to Suicide 101. Second story. Picture on the screen that follows this picture. It's a picture of a young lady. Her name was Amber Craig. And she took her life on May 25th, 2005. She was a starting goalie as a freshman at El Dorado High School on the varsity girls soccer team. The picture on the right was 3 days before she took her life. Now I want to ask you a question. Does looking at that picture give you any indication that, something is desperately wrong with this girl? No. Would you even know? Because the problem is this. We never know, based on what someone does with their face, what's really going on inside. Sidebar, many of you hide behind the same masks. I don't think every class clown is suicidal, by the way. I'm just clarifying that. But some of you use humor to deflect conflict. You do all kinds of things because it's hard. If people really got to know who we are, sometimes we're afraid what people would think. And so if you look at this next slide, I think there's something interesting going on because there's so many faces of depression. Everybody who is suicidal is depressed in some way or another, okay? So look at all these people. Now, I realize I could have picked 9 newer pictures that might reflect who you know, but this is an ancient history quiz. So could you help me with who are these 8 people up there? Because every one of them wrestled with depression. Anybody know who? Just go from top, across, and bottom. Who's upper left? Yay. Number 2, Rosie O'Donnell. Number 3, Princess Diana. Number 4, Brittany. Number 5, Owen Wilson. Jim Carrey. Drew Carey. And Abraham Lincoln. Now, what do they all have in common? Just look at those pictures. Almost all of them are what? White. All of them are white. Very good. What else? They're smiling. They're famous. Half of them are comedians. 2 look kind of sad. Number 4 and number 8, right? And so just by looking at someone's countenance doesn't tell you whether they're depressed or suicidal, right? So that leads me to some questions. Let's go to the next slide here. What about, before we go to did you know, what about depression and the Bible? Like, is it okay to be depressed? For those of you watching this, I'm speaking to a Christian audience. I don't get to do this when I'm speaking in public high school, so this is a little bonus section for those of you in the room tonight. Charles Spurgeon, one of the most famous preachers in England and in yesteryears, wrestled with depression. He'd preach to thousands of people on a Sunday morning and then be completely depressed the next day. And many felt like he had a panic disorder. Some think he just wrestled with bipolar. We don't know. So when we think about depression, let's look at this. Job, do you think he had reason to be depressed? Anybody? Who can give me a 30-second summary of Job? What do we know about the Bible character Job? Yes?
Basically, the devil asked God if he could ruin Job's life.
Yeah.
And God allowed him to see if Job would still be faithful to God.
Yeah.
The devil took basically everything away from him. All of his animals, his life. He lost it all, right?
His children.
Children, wives, livestock, you name it. And yes, the problem is this. He writes the book, and here's what happens. You read these statements, and you go, how could he write it? Christians should not feel like this, right? Of course. I cannot eat for sign. I hate my life. Does anybody ever hate their life? I did. Not that I'm going to kill myself, but you just flunked Algebra 2. You got to take it over for summer school. Oh, joy. Day after hopeless day, my heart is broken. My groans pour out like water. Depression haunts my days. My weary nights are filled with pain. I cry to you, O God, but you don't answer me. There are lots of characters in the Bible that wrestled with depression at some level. And so just because you're depressed, that's not a sin. That's pretty normal. Let's see what we have next here. Lamentations says this, my soul is downcast within me, yet I call to mind, and therefore I have hope. Because of the Lord's great love, we are not consumed. By the way, that's written by Jeremiah, who was known as the weeping prophet. He cried a lot, even more than me, than a sermon on a Sunday morning. So there you go. All right, keep going. And so I want to ask you, these are some statistics. Did you know that suicide's the third leading cause of death of 15 to 24-year-olds? So what's numbers 1 and 2? Accidents. And depending, in our country, it's not war and famine. It's probably homicide in terms of our country. It's the number 2 leading cause of death of 10 to 14-year-olds. That's your junior high or elementary school siblings. Number 2, a person dies from suicide every 11 minutes in the United States. That's 123 Americans. This is just statistics in the United States. When I started doing this presentation, it was 18 every 18 minutes, and that suicide number has gone up and up and up. And what we've just experienced coming out of COVID over the last couple years, mental health issues with high school students are through the roof. Almost 46,000 people killed themselves in 2020. By the way, most of these statistics come from the CDC and other websites like that. 1 out of 12 college students will have a suicide plan. So just because you get through high school, your parents will go, whoa, great, we got them through high school. And then, oh no, what happened when they get to college? Females, get this, are more likely to attempt suicide, but the guys are 4 times more likely to be successful in their attempts. So you ladies attempt more, but the guys are more successful at taking their lives. Why is that? What do you think? The method that's used. Yeah, guys use more violent means, typically guns, right? Girls typically do what? First choice for most girls is what? Pills or cutting. Ladies, some of you, I hope none of you are cutters, but if you are cutting, you need to talk to someone. Every time I spoke in a public school, there were girls in the summer with long sleeves hoodies on, with all kinds of bracelets, and I would say about every other girl that was dressed like that was covering, they were cutting. And I won't get into how you can be more sophisticated in cutting, because that is, I'm not giving an instruction class, but I'm just telling you, some of your friends are cutting, and some of you know it, and you don't know what to do about it. And so later on tonight, if you need to talk to someone, we will give you a strategy on how you can help that friend. All right, let's keep going. 1 out of 12. 1 out of 12. So there's a picture of a very famous former NFL football coach by the name of Tony Dungy, who was a Christ follower. And his son, Jamie, committed suicide. I remember when it happened. I cut out the article. His son committed suicide in December, and 3 months later, the Indianapolis Colts win the Super Bowl. You say, why would you pick a random... So he was in college, he committed suicide, famous guy. See, this one's another one that's pretty close to home, because Jamie would have been 36 years old this year. But I knew Jamie when he was a 5-year-old on my son's t-ball team, and I was his coach. And so when you see a kid like that, years later, in the newspaper, his life was taken, or he took his own life, I want to ask you a question. Do any of you have a 5-year-old sibling, a younger brother or sister, 5, 6, 7 years old? Anybody? Yeah. Sitting where you're sitting right now, is there any possible way you could fathom that 14 years from now, that little brother or sister is going to take their life? No. Because when you're 5, life is good, right? What do you do as a 5-year-old? Your number one thing is recess. If you're in kindergarten, you get to drink milk and cookies, and you're always sneaking donuts. If you're at church on Sunday, you're sneaking out of Sunday school, whatever, right? Life is good when you're 5, for the most part. It's when you get into your high school years and college years, life gets exponentially more difficult, doesn't it? And for those of you watching this online, these are my 5 high school volunteers who are going to pretend like they are sophomores in high school at a local high school. I think I'm going to pick, they're sophomores at Agoura High School. All right, so come on up here, my sophomore health class volunteers. Come on up, line up, take your blue sheet with you, because you might not remember what I'm asking you to do. And I have 5 of you. 1, 2, 3, 4, and... All righty, so let him go first. You're 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There are questions that'll be behind you. I'm going to ask you, is it true or false? And I just want you to answer this question. I don't care whether you say true or false. I just want to know how you came up with your answer. All right, that's the goal here. All right, asking someone, are you thinking of committing suicide may lead a person to attempt it. Do you think that's true or false?
False.
False. Why is it false? Let's see what the survey says. False. He's correct. All right, good. Why? Why is it false?
This is bringing it out to the light. It's not necessarily affirming it.
Right. One of the major myths is if you bring this topic up, you're just planting the idea in somebody else's mind, and now they're going to do it. Totally false. No, it's actually very helpful. All right, number 2, let's look at it. Those who talk about suicide will never actually do it. True or false?
False.
False? Why? Let's see if he's right. Oh, he is. Okay, good. All right, why is it false?
Because anyone could be capable of doing it.
Yeah? And so if they talk about it, doesn't that just mean that they're not doing it? They're just wanting, are they just wanting you to feel bad for them? Maybe, right? Actually, over 73% of the time, if someone verbalizes that they're going to take their life, they oftentimes follow through. Before Amber took her life, 10 days earlier, she OD'd on a bunch of pills that she got out of her the medicine cabinet. She told her parents when she was throwing up, because it didn't kill her, that it was bad deli meat from Slotsky's Deli. And that's what they thought. And then 10 days later, she actually took her life. All right, number 3. Suicide's inherited or runs in family. Be careful here. True or false?
I'd say true. I think it's the mental illness that's inherited and the social dynamics in families that sort of passes that mindset down.
Let me ask him a different question. Do you think there's a suicide gene and you're born with that and like, oh boy?
Suicide gene? No.
Good. What's the answer? False. You got it. So here's the deal. It's a trick question. I get it. So the bottom line is this. Depression oftentimes is a cascading event that happens in a family, right? And how people handle all kinds of things, you see family models. There are some things that do run in families. Diabetes runs in families. Heart disease runs in families. That's why I'm not supposed to have a double-double every single day of my life. I do not like that plan, all right? All right, so some things are inherited, but we have no medical connection between any kind of biological evidence that because you were born in this family, that therefore you're more prone to taking your life. All right, number 4, it says this. In fact, maybe you can go ahead and read it.
Oh, okay.
Go for it.
Suicide is a specific problem of a specific social or economic class.
True or false?
I think it's false.
False. Let's see. You are correct. You see any pattern here? Okay. Why is it false?
Because I think anyone can get depressed no matter. It's not, I mean, your previous slide illustrated that the amount of wealth and social securities that you have doesn't equal mental health.
No. Yeah. Because if I could prove that it's only people that go to Oaks Christian, for instance, or a certain affluence in our community, well, then maybe we'd only talk to those kids. But here's what I've talked in some pretty sketchy, I won't name the schools, but let's just say I didn't need a police escort getting in, but it's a tough neighborhood. When I talk to those kids, you know who they think are weak? You guys. Now, what? They don't even know you. They just assume if you're from an upper or middle class family, you got everything going. What in the world's wrong with you? Can't you deal with life? The flip side is I often talk to students in these kind of environments. So it must be tough living in South Central or East LA. It must be tough. And so we have these perceptions because we don't really know what the other person's feeling, and we don't really know what it's like to live in their shoes. Okay, number 5. Most suicides occur at night. True or false?
I'm going to say true.
True. That would be the popular answer. How many, raise your hands, we're not going to show them. How many would think it's true? Anybody think it's false? Okay, those of you who think it's false, so it's false, sorry. But why do you think it's false? Anybody? Even if your voice comes from behind the camera. Why do you think it's false?
I thought that because, like, at night you get lonely and it gets dark.
Yes. Yeah. Lonely at night. That makes a lot of sense. No one's there. What else?
I was going to say during the day it might be more popular because there's less people around. You have more time to be alone.
Yeah.
At home, people are home at night.
We can't conclusively point this out, but for high school students, it's between 2 and 6 p.m. because of 2 primary reasons. It's after what? School. And before parents get home. In fact, when kids are crying out for help, oftentimes they'll OD at about 5:45 when dad is expected or mom's expected, so they'll find them, and it goes horribly bad when parents aren't home when they thought they'd be home. All right, let's hear it for a wonderful sophomore class at Agoura High School. Let's hear it for them. Woo! All right, let's keep going. So, the causes. Why are kids killing themselves? And the first one is depression. They're mad, sad, withdrawn, all right? Now, we got to know that there's got to be a difference between someone who's just depressed or someone who's depressed and someone who's sad. Not all depression leads to suicide, but I know all of us have been sad at some point in our lives. Is that true? So it doesn't mean you're suicidal. So what's the difference between being sad and being depressed? If you're sad, go ahead, you can answer. Quick answer. What do you think?
Depression is really, really long.
Yes, it's prolonged. Depression can go for days, weeks, and months, right? And they don't know why. They can't point to an event that caused them to be depressed. Now, there are plenty of you who come from homes that aren't great. I get it. and you hate the arguing that goes on between your mom and dad. And that makes you sad, and sometimes it makes you depressed, and maybe even cry yourself to sleep at night. I get it. Other of you go, man, I got a great family. That's not where my depression comes from. My depression comes from the fact that I haven't been on a date and I'm 93 years old. Or 16 or whatever, right? And we base our whole life on whether someone wants to take us to prom or homecoming. And so typically it's about sadness. We are sad about all kinds of things. Here's the things that I've been sad about. The day my daughter miscarried and our first grandchild 12 years ago. Pretty sad day for the Erwin family. The day, and you're going to think that, oh, come on, John, really? The day that we had to take Molly, our dog, who we had for 16 years, to the vet, and she died. Well, she died. I don't want to get into it. Any of you had to put a pet down because they were in so much pain? Horrible, right? And so you were sad. Grandma dies. You're sad. If you've ever had a sibling die, you're sad. Now you're sad for other reasons. Someone breaks up with you. And I'll talk about that, relationships in a second. Okay, so we know that depression lasts a long, long time. And oftentimes you can't pinpoint what. Number 2, hopelessness. Hopelessness. That's where, during COVID, a ton of high school kids were just struggling with hopelessness. Like, I hate this. I can't sit behind the screen one more minute. And maybe some of you felt like that. Hopelessness. What causes someone to lose hope? Well, because they don't have something to live for. But I think oftentimes relationships in high school get magnified. Next. Purpose. There's a lack of purpose or meaning in life. Now, the picture of this guy is a very famous pastor who just retired. His name is Rick Warren. He pastored a church called Saddleback, had thousands of parishioners. And the sad story is when I started talking about purpose in life, he had written the most influential book, probably other than the Bible, in the 21st century, called The Purpose-Driven Life. It sold 60 million copies. But since I have been talking about this, unfortunately, about 6 years ago, his son committed suicide. So that's changed the trajectory of their life and mental illness, etc. But where do you find purpose and meaning in life? Now, I realize for some of you, this is a no-brainer. So what we'll do is we find purpose in life from what? And I'd like you, every answer you give me, to begin with the letter F. All right? Where do you find purpose and meaning in life? Give me one. Faith. That never comes up in a public high school in the top 10. I wish it would, but thank you for faith. All right. Faith and what else?
Friends.
Faith and friends. Good. What else? Yes. Faith, friends, family. What else? Fantasies. Well, maybe fantasy football. Okay. Faith, family, fame, friends. What else? Your future. What else? Fear. I have never been given that. You find purpose in life being afraid. I have to ponder that. Fear. Let me give you all the answers I've gotten. Faith, family, fun, football, foosball, flirting, fun, females, fitness, focus. And the funniest was at a local high school, and I'm in an assembly program with 600 kids, and the little Hispanic kid says, "Frijoles!" And he definitely got a laugh, and he ended the discussion. So, yeah, all kinds of things we can find purpose in life in. So let me just suggest this. If you consider yourself a Christ follower, I hope faith in Jesus Christ is a big part of why you do what you do. If you're looking and you're searching and you're not sure where God fits in your life, this is a great group and great leaders to explore where your faith is going. All right? Now, number 4, stress. All right? Stress, an unreasonable pressure to succeed. Unreasonable pressure to succeed. Where's the number 1 stressor in most high school students' life? Grades. What's number 2? Relationships, what's number 3? By the way, I'm not agreeing or disagreeing, but I agree, they're in the top 10. What else? What's right next to grades? Getting into college. Very good. And not any college, right? The right college, right? So grades in college. Some of you know that for a number of years, we hosted international students from China through Oaks Christian. And they were high achievers. And I remember Alan, even though he was valedictorian that year, or maybe number 2, took 9 AP classes in the course of 2 years, being very depressed one day. And I said, Alan, what's wrong? He goes, I got an A- on a quiz. I'm like, isn't that like in quantum physics or something like that you're taking? He goes, well, no, it was only AP calculus. Okay. Well, I was thinking, well, you should have taken that when you were a sophomore, dude, you slacker. So I didn't. And so I said to him, oh, that's a bummer. Why are you so upset about this? He goes, you don't know my parents. And I go, what does that mean? And off screen, I'll tell you what an A- was called in his culture, right? And what his parents thought of that. And so the bottom line is a lot of kids feel stress from school. Some of the kids that you would least expect it are the most vulnerable, okay? All right, that's the last one. Escape, an impulsive response to a temporary problem. An impulsive response to a temporary problem. Probably the most graphic, and I'm not going to get into the details, was a college student of mine in Minnesota that took his life. And he had been coming to our ministry high and often drunk. And that puts a youth pastor or a college pastor in an awkward place on how do you deal with someone, with substance abuse issues, and what's going to happen, and how do you deal with that, and how do you be loving, but like that can't continue. And so I talked to him afterwards, and he was crying. He goes, I know I got to change. I'm sorry. And he was very, very repentant. I thought, all right, because it's your kindness that leads us to repentance. I'm not here to jump down his throat. I just knew he was really, really hurting. And 2 days later, he blew his brains out in his bedroom. Now, I thought she'd be encouraged that I could say that, hey, let's call him Fred. Fred really had kind of a nice talk with me. She was angry. She was mad. I remember being at the house. She pointed her finger at me and said, you caused this. Bunch of hypocrites, legalistic, holier than thou. And I'm like, what can you do? Nothing you can say. I said, I loved your son. And he had a different narrative. His pain was so great. And yet she was angry. So here's a principle. Hurt people, right? So sometimes some people will rage at you when you want to get them help, especially when you talk about what you can do. So we looked at the causes. What are some of the clues? What should we look for? We're going to go through these pretty quickly. Just like on your dashboard, it kind of tells you what's going on, whether you're about to run out of gas, whether your engine's going to overheat. Here's some clues, early warning signs that maybe something isn't right. First one up there is what? Verbal expressions or thoughts of suicide, despair, hopelessness. They will talk about it. They won't always talk about it. They won't advertise it. They're not going to post it, on a sign in their window. But texting is a very interesting way of letting people know that you're going to do something crazy. No one's going to text saying, hey, I'm jumping off the roof today at 5, be there. It's more like, hey, if I wasn't around, would you care? Or, hey, do you think that there really is a God? And what if I don't believe that and I took my life? Now, you'll rarely ever get that much detail, but they'll hint around the fringes, or maybe they're drawing stuff that's pretty creepy, and you say, There's a lot of weird stuff going on. I get it. But this is, I don't want to say satanic, but there's just stuff that's dark. I mean, really dark. All right? So they talk about it in some way, shape, or form. Well, look at the next one. Giving away valued possessions. Why would that be a clue? How could that be a clue? Why would someone give anything that's important to them away? Yeah. You're not going to need it, right? I don't need this. When Amber, the night before she took her life, she put her goalie gloves, everything neatly in her bag and left it on the top of the goal and went home. She also cleaned her room that night, which tells you how wacky kids are thinking. I'm going to take my life, but I'm going to make sure I wear clean underwear and my room will be clean. You see that? That dichotomy, like they're thinking through some things, but they're about to take their life. When I do parent programs, and we talk about this, every parent gets freaked out. My son cleaned up his room? I've never seen it. He has a girlfriend, all right? Just start there, all right? We don't have to go to the end game here that he's suicidal. All right. You give away a rookie card. If you're a baseball card fan, you give away a Mike Trout rookie card or I don't know. I have like 4 Clayton Kershaw bobbleheads. They don't mean a whole lot to me, but people give stuff away. They make sure their dog's cared for, that kind of thing. Okay, next one. Suddenly becoming cheerful after prolonged depression. Why would that be a clue? They're cheerful. What's the problem?
Just they found a resolution to it.
They found the resolution. That's exactly right. The problem is when you're vacillating, right? When you're trying to decide, should I not, should I not? And it's that stress of the indecision. But once you made that decision, psychologists say there's a 48 to 72 hour window of what they call temporary euphoria. In other words, all's good. In fact, the 72 hours before Amber took her life, she was fine. No one had any clue. All right, what's another one? Let's see. Significant change in behavior habits. So A students become failing students. Kids who have never smoked a joint in their life start smoking pot. It's the craziest stuff. They flip. It's like, who is this person? What happened? They don't care. What's another one? Break up with a boyfriend or girlfriend. I would love to say that's not very high on the list, but I would say of all the suicides I've dealt with, it was consistent in at least 50% of those, and it was always guys taking their life over a girl. I have never dealt with a girl who took their life about a guy. Probably the most interesting one was, and we'll call them Lucy and Ricky. Lucy and Ricky. And Ricky's a senior, Lucy's a junior. She breaks up with him. He is distraught. He's working in his front yard with his dad, and they're trimming their trees, oak trees. And he's about 35, 40 feet up, and he decides to jump out of the tree because life's not worth living without Lucy. He jumps out of the tree. Now, I just want to clarify, if you're going to jump out of a tree at 40 feet, what do trees have? Branches. Do you think it's a clear shot? Boom, 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 boom. He's like a pinball going through the tree, and he hits the ground and he breaks his wrist. Now he's really depressed. Can't even kill myself. So he's in the hospital for concussion protocol. So I go to see him in the hospital. And something doesn't add up to me. Like, you're roped in, you're careful, you've done this a million times. I say, how did you fall out of the tree? Now, put in your mind the blonde-haired surfer dude from Huntington Beach, and he says, dude, I don't know, man, I tripped. Huh? I'm thinking, you were tripping? Was there something else going on? No, man, I just tripped. You tripped? And I knew he'd broken up with Lucy, so I say, Ricky, does this have anything to do with Lucy? He goes, no, of course not. I said, really? So I leaned in. Come up here, Ricky. Yes, you're going to be Ricky. He's sitting right here. And I look Ricky right in the eyes, and I lean down just like this. And this is why you would never hire me to be a counselor. I'm going to tell you right now, this is an example of what don't ever hire me. And I look at him, you stand up, I'll stay down. No, you stand. Well, let's play this game, up and down. I said, Ricky, women might be worth living for, but they're not worth dying for. And 4 of you left. That's exactly what he did. He starts laughing. He has just jumped out. You can sit down, Ricky. Thank you. Glad you're doing better. Let's hear it for Ricky. Yeah, exactly. Like, what was he thinking? He goes, and he said that. Those exact words. He goes, yeah, I know. Like, what was I thinking? Now, that's not your chance to go rip into him. Yeah, what were you thinking, you moron? Of course I didn't say that. But I can't believe I said the other either. So I said, hey, Ricky, you got to get help. And he did. It's 7 years later, and I'm doing a wedding. Guess who Ricky married? Lucy. 7 years later. It's a great story. They have kids. I won't tell you where they live. It's unbelievable. They got help. They broke up for a while. They got back together in college, and they, quote, lived happily ever after. But for a moment in time, the kid jumped out of a tree for a chick. I'm telling you, ladies, you have power over us. I get it. But he jumped out of the tree for the girl. So, in a long tradition for many, many years, you're going to repeat after me, and all of you are going to raise your hands, whether you're a male or a female, whether you're a Ricky or a Lucy, raise your hand, and please repeat after me in a loud way. I do promise, to never jump out of a tree, for anyone. Thank you. Now, I say that, and I realize you say, are you just making fun of him? No. What I'm saying is, so often we make impulsive decisions, we don't think through the consequences, and then we wonder, how did we find ourselves here? And that's what happened with him. So good story. Good talk. Well, withdrawal, moodiness, or prolonged depression. We've talked about it, goes on for days, weeks, months, can't pinpoint it. Next, failing grades or declining quality in schoolwork. Why would that be a clue for someone who is suicidal? They don't care. Because why not? Because they won't be there to take the final, right? I'm dead, literally. So they don't care. Now, I think there's other reasons why your grades could go down, though. Let me suggest 2 other ones that have nothing to do with this, all right? The first one involves a little tiny cigarette. You're smoking the doobies, aren't you, huh? Little marijuana there, and you just lose motivation. You just get fat and get the munchies. Yeah, maybe. I was a straight A student in high school until I met my now wife, Cheryl. When she was a freshman, I was a junior. I was 16, she was 14. Spring semester of my junior year, I got my first B in high school in Spanish. Because mi amor, there was no cell phones, there's only landlines, and it was horrible, and I was in love, and I got a B in Spanish. And so I hold that against my wife. I've been now married to for 44 years. You caused me to get a B. I got a few more of that, and worse once I got to college, and then seminary. Ooh, really bad. All right, bottom line is that's why your grades make it all. But here's another one, increased use of drugs or alcohol. Now, that's a different deal. Why would they start doing more drugs if they're depressed or suicide?
To flee life.
Flee life? Okay, what else? I think they're anesthetizing their pain, right? I just want to dull the pain. All right, and then one more thing I think we have up there, bullying. I won't get into these 2 stories, we don't have time, but the whole bullying of kids is epidemic. And this is not a comment about what's going on with gender fluidity and all that's going on. That's a whole nother topic. But I got to tell you this, if you know of someone, for whatever reason, is getting bullied on your high school campus, you got to do the right thing. Christians, you are the ones who make a difference when kids don't feel welcome. They sit alone. They have no friends. They're loners. You can be the difference. I've learned something about Fellowship of Christian Athletes. Do you know the principle? If you feed them, They will come, right? Man, it was so awesome. I was the pizza man, or I wasn't, but they brought the pizza and the kids flocked into that room. Now, you know what was cool about those leaders that I'm going to embarrass to death, and we won't mention their name? If this was adults doing it, no, I'm going to preach, and you got to wait to eat your pizza till I'm done talking. But they let them eat, and they ate the pizza, and they didn't ditch. We did lock all the doors. No, we didn't do that. But the bottom line is, when you're kind to people, the world notices that. High school students who are kind when the general population is so judgmental and I didn't get enough likes in my Instagram account or my TikTok account, I can't keep up, whatever account it is now currently cool. People see that and they can see genuine kindness, and I hope you're those kind of students, and I think you are. All right. What do you do? We're going to wrap this up. Number one, don't belittle or shame them. Don't belittle or shame them. Guys, we can be kind of cruel. We can be sarcastic. We can kind of be like, whatever, here's a quarter, call someone who cares. Yeah, not a good look, right? But that's a stereotype. Girls, I think sometimes we think, oh, they're just so much into drama. I can't hear this, take this one more time. But don't belittle or shame them, okay? Number two, don't try to analyze them or tell them your interpretation of their feelings. If someone who's generally depressed, you know what's a great response? Man, that must just really be horrible. Empathize. Oh my goodness, I can't. Don't say, well, you know, when I was, and then you give them a one-up story. Nah, don't do that. Just don't try. You're not Dr. Phil, you're not Oprah, you're not anybody. You're not Ellen. Just don't try to interpret their feelings. Then last, never promise to keep a secret. Never promise to keep a secret. See this letter on the screen right now? You can't see it or read it, but this is a letter. I'm speaking in Detroit in a high school, and I'm talking about never promise to keep a secret. And this letter gets intercepted by someone else. It's from Michelle to Courtney, and the last paragraph says, I really hope that no one finds out about what I'm going to do. I haven't made my final decision, but I know what I want. Suicide's my only answer, and I'm hoping that something good will happen soon, but I doubt it. Courtney is like, what am I going to do? And after class, she walks up to me and the teacher and says, this came to me. What do we do? And thankfully, they intervened. Michelle is alive today because Courtney didn't keep a secret. I can't tell you how many times you are the first line of defense. You're seeing things before parents see things. You're seeing things before coaches and teachers see things. You're the ones who can say, something's off. Something's not right about this. We have a story of a kid who could hear a kid moaning in the bathroom, and he had slit his wrists, and he was bleeding out in a bathroom, and a high school kid, a stranger, got him help and saved his life. And so I hope you never have a dramatic save somebody's life story, but I can tell you this. If you provide a listening ear to your friends, you may be the one that saved their life. All right? All right, next. What should you do? Take every situation seriously. What if they're just crying wolf? Okay, I get it. Just because they're, yeah. But imagine if you don't check it out and they actually did take their life. How do you think you'd feel? Horrible. You're like, oh my goodness. How, why didn't I do something about this, right? All right, number two, take them to a trusted friend, counselor, coach, whatever, pastor. I would like to say that I do a ton of this. I don't do much of this kind of counseling anymore, but I used to do a ton of it. But there are people who can give you help, your friends help. Talk to someone you trust, all right? And then lastly, tell them there's hope. Tell them there's hope. I think in our world today, post-COVID, I think hope is something that we can give to people that the general world just doesn't understand. And I think your kindness and your ability to say, I believe there's a better day ahead for you, can literally save somebody's life. So you can do it. All right? Hey, thanks. You've been a great audience. Thanks for listening. And we're going to turn off the camera and just talk for a moment.